Hello, Ed here. Please enjoy this interview that I did with Hands of Change some years ago. If you like it, feel free to go to Hands of Change and tell them that you like it. The link to the original is down below. This video has been edited slightly to remove a few of my characteristic pauses and to remove the question and answer section at the end. If you have your own questions, feel free to drop them down below. Please enjoy the video. The Lost City of Aratta. It sounds all mysterious. It sounds like we're talking about a place like Atlantis, but actually a lot of ancient cities are lost cities, particularly in Mesopotamia. And this particular one is very important for the shape of the ancient world. They were very influential. And for a lot of time, people thought this was a city that didn't physically exist, that it was a mythical place. And coming into researching it, that's what I thought as well. I had wanted to start writing a story set in the time a little bit before the time of Gilgamesh. So in the time of the semi-divine kings. And one of the big things that was going on there was a struggle with the city of Aratta. So I thought, okay, well, what can I learn about this from the myths? What was this fantastical, mythical, not physically real city? Well, they were a city of great wealth. Okay. They imported food and they exported tin, at which point I'm like, wait a second, this is a real city. Because the mystery of tin is something that archeologists have been struggling with for a long time. And what is the mystery of tin? Well, the mystery of tin is we know that the Bronze Age started in the Middle East. And to make bronze, you need copper, which they had, and you need tin, which they didn't have. So where did the tin come from to make bronze? And when you read the stories, you find out that a lot of it came from the city of Aratta. And so I started kind of jumping down a rabbit hole. Where is this city? Have they found it? And as it turns out, they found it multiple times all over the world. Unfortunately, because it's this major city in Sumerian mythology, whenever they discover an ancient city that's got these great wonders, they're like, oh, we've discovered Aratta. And so that wasn't helpful at all. So I went investigating on my own. So the first clue is tin. Where does tin come from? Well, you got these little dots, and you'll notice none of them are in the Middle East. They're all extremely far away. So I thought, okay, we've got a few sources in Europe and we've got a few sources on the far side of Asia, but nothing particularly close. So I thought, okay, well, where do we actually see the oldest tin? And you can kind of see not the oldest tin, the oldest bronze. You can kind of see cluster around this Three Lakes region. You can see a cluster in southeastern Europe. So that would be a good spot to look for tin. But as you could see from the map, there's no tin there. And so I started digging into the metallurgical science behind the bronze that they were studying. There was an article that says they tested it against every known deposit of tin in all of Europe, because of course they pick Europe and not, Asia. And it doesn't match any of them. Well, that's good news for me and bad news. It's good news in that I can discount all sources of tin in Europe. So the tin that they were looking for is this good tin deposit. It's called cassiterite. And this is what you use to make high quality bronze. Well, that's great and all, but the earliest bronze deposits were not made with high quality bronze. They were made with low quality stanite. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go a different route. Let's investigate some of the other trade routes that we've got. The city of Aratta was said to be wealthy in lapis lazuli. And there were 3 cities in Asia that were thought to be maybe the lost city of Aratta. One was Mohenjo-Daro, which is a long way away, and they don't have lapis. In fact, you would have to kind of go out of your way to get lapis to it. Another one is a city kind of without a name up in Afghanistan. And that's where actually the lapis trade route comes from. And if you travel down that way, there's a spot about halfway to Mesopotamia where there's this mysterious burnt city. And it's got other cities around it. It's halfway between the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia, halfway between the source of lapis lazuli and Mesopotamia. They were very big, starting in about 2500 BC, which is too late. So it's an important city. It's a great lost city that they found, but we still don't know what it was called. All we know at this point is that it's not Aratta. So I had to move on. Oh, and you'll notice as you go down, this trade route comes through here and then crosses across here in the Zagros mountain range. There's a lot of very difficult terrain across the Zagros mountain range. So there's only a couple of spots you can really cross. You can cross here, and then you can cross in a spot kind of up here. All right, now, that's when I went back to the tin. This is a beautiful piece of stanite. Stanite was what they used to use for tin. They stopped using it once they discovered cassiterite. But for hundreds and hundreds of years, this was the mineral that, it was the mineral that if you wanted to build an army and arm them with the best weapons, you needed some access to this. It doesn't make great bronze, but nobody had great bronze at that time. And the bronze you can make with this is way better than just a pure copper weapon. So where do you see that? Well, you could see a deposit of tin right on the far side of the Zagros Mountains. That's good. That means we've got at least some sort of tin that you can find in the general area. And then I found out that there's another source that was made a little after this map was made that was found right in so you can see on this map the Caucasus and the Taurus Mountains. So there's a little bit of mineral deposits of tin, not as good as this other one, but a little bit of mineral deposits of tin right there. Now, the third clue was that you could get there by water. It's a place that you can go via river, and it takes you to a place that in ancient times was called the Zab Mountains. You'll notice that the Persian Gulf was far, far further inland during this time because the ocean level was higher. This was a little after the Ice Age, and a huge amount of glaciers were melting, raising the ocean levels. And that kind of blocks off some of this path towards the spot that you see labeled as Elam, but it still allows a little bit of a coastal path from Elam to Sumer. So that led me to, where might the Zab Mountains be? Well, we've got this huge network of rivers, and you've got the Fertile Crescent. So anything in this area is going to be a lot easier to get to. And that led me to an interesting little place. Remember that lesser deposit of tin I said? Well, that's located in this kind of Three Lakes region. Now, this is a modern map. This is actually a modern Google map. You can see these 3 lakes. And in ancient times, their water levels were much, much higher. And so I recreated that map, and I found out that the Zab Mountains, they're not really a secret. It's just that they're not called the Zab Mountains anymore. They just call themselves the Zab Rivers. There's 2 rivers that come from this area. And once I knew that, I knew exactly where Aratta was. Okay, I knew kind of where Aratta was. It's right at the source of either the Lesser Zab River or the Greater Zab River. It is the place where you take your ships out of the water when heading into the Zab Mountains. And if you've got a river called Zab coming out of the mountains, it's pretty clear which mountains they're talking about. So I found Aratta as most likely right here, and the second most likely spot is right here. What did the ancient peoples of this area call the region, call the people that lived there? They didn't call themselves the Aratta. We've got the Urartu, which you can kind of see the similarity in sounds. And there's also a mountain some of you may have heard of called Ararat, which also has the similarity in sound. So we've got Ararat, Aratta, Urartu. So I'm thinking, okay, I've got the right spot. But what makes this so important? What makes this just the be-all, end-all of ancient lost cities that all sorts of archaeological discoveries are always saying, oh, this is Aratta, when it isn't. Oh, and by the way, after I did a ton of research, went down the wrong path, found out, yeah, archaeologists generally have an idea that it's gonna be in this area. So I'm not the first person to quote unquote discover Aratta. Although, why aren't there expeditions in there? Why don't you have a lot of archaeology done in here? Well, when they were first figuring out a little bit about it, there was a conflict between the government of Iran at the time and a group that was taking power. And then after that, there was a conflict between the people of Iran and the people that live in this area. And then there was a conflict between the people of Turkey and the people that live in this area. Then there was a conflict between the people of Iraq and the people that... Then ISIS moved in. So there hasn't been a good way to do archaeological digs in this area for just decades. And that's probably the reason why the actual Lost City of Aratta has never really been discovered. We know kind of where it is, but we can't justify, putting lives at risk and sending in the expeditions. We do know that you've got a section of tin right here, got another section of tin right here. We've got a archaeological site right here. We've got an archaeological site kind of in this area. We've got an archaeological site in this area. So we do have a group of people that are in the area that could be this whole civilization. So Aratta might not have been one city. It might have been a collection of associated cities. So let's look a little bit at the text. So there's a proverb. When authorities are wise and the poor are loyal, it is the effect of the blessings of Aratta. And as far as I can tell, the blessings of Aratta are wealth and trade. So if you've developed wealth in your nation, the poor become loyal. If you've got the blessing of trade, then the people have more variety and they can live more comfortably. So from the myth of Gilgamesh and Hawawa, one line goes, on earth they knew the way even to Aratta. They know the destructive weather like the merchants. They know the mountain crannies like the pigeons. They will guide you to the place in the mountains where the boats have to be pulled from the water. So this is telling you it's going to be the source of a river. It's where you can't anymore navigate in the area via a little raft. In Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta, the messenger gave heed to the words of his king. He journeyed by starry night, and by day he traveled with Utu of heaven, the sun god. Where and to whom will he carry the important message of Inanna with its stinging tone? He brought it up into the Zubi Mountains. So here Zubi Mountains is a variation of Zab Mountain. He descended with it from the Zubi Mountains. Susa and the land of Ankan humbly saluted Inanna like tiny mice. In the great mountain ranges, the teeming multitudes groveling in the dust for her. He traversed 5 mountains, 6 mountains, 7 mountains. He lifted his eyes as he approached Aratta. He stepped joyfully into the courtyard of Aratta. He made known the authority of his king. So, what path is that? Well, that's mostly overland. So he took a different river. He went up this way towards Susa and then went across the mountains. And that's a pretty reasonable way to go if you know that Aratta it's approachable by the river, but you don't necessarily want to go the entire route by river. If you have a messenger, going upriver is not always the fastest way, but you probably want to take the river down when you come back. So he went to Susa and Awan, and then he traveled up the mountains to Aratta. Lugal Banda and the mountain cave. Now, at the time that the king set his mace towards the city, Enmerkar, son of Utu, prepared an expedition against Aratta, the mountain of the holy divine powers. He was going to set off to destroy the rebel land. The Lord began a mobilization of his city. And then later on, the little stones of it, shining stones in their glory, Sajkal stones, we don't know what that means. They landed below from crying out in the mountain land Zabu. So again, we've got the Zab mountains. From its voice, and then we have a bit of damaged text. Open, may my limbs not perish in the mountains of the cypress. And it turns out that roundabouts where we're looking, there are traces that there used to be cypress trees in the area. We know that there was this great battle between Uruk, where Gilgamesh lived, or would live later, and the city of Aratta. But why? Isn't trade better? Well, that led me to dig into what was actually going on. So you'll see the green labels on the map, Tin and Hamazu. Well, in the myth, Susa had taken the capital city of the Hamazi, and that caused the Hamazi to have refugees that take up residence in Aratta. Obviously, they can't take up refugees in Mesopotamia because you have to go through the Elamites to get to Mesopotamia. So that leads them into the opposite direction. And that cuts off trade from Mesopotamia through the Elamite lands, and it cuts off the access to tin. So this very valuable material ends up only being able to go across in the areas of Aratta. And Aratta has its own tin storehouses. And with this cut off, the lapis lazuli trade route gets diverted from across this area or across this area, and it has to go the long way around through Aratta. So that makes Aratta the one source that anyone, anywhere, could get tin and lapis from. And that made it hugely important. That meant that any of the military powers of the day had to have access to Aratta. So imagine you're Aratta and you're trading with Mesopotamia. Now there's 2 major importers of tin, 2 cities that want this valuable mineral. There's Kish right down here, and then further down the river, there's Uruk. Well, if you're Aratta, at first you're going to go, okay, well, Uruk's going to buy more. But do I want to go the extra distance just to get to Uruk when Kish is right along the way? No, I'll just trade with Kish. Well, that led to a military rivalry between Uruk and Kish, because they were the two cities that wanted tin the most. They were the ones that were going to make weapons. You've got the goddess Inanna, who is cherished in both cities, but in different ways. And a lot of people overlook her aspect as a goddess of war. Well, being a goddess of war, she is not directly, but indirectly a patron of the creation of swords and spear tips and all the things that you would make with bronze. So Uruk doesn't want to go directly against Kish. So instead, they lead a military expedition to Aratta, and this secures the line of tin from Aratta down into Uruk. And of course, Kish can't let this stand. So what do? Are they going to attack Uruk? No, they're not going to attack Uruk. Uruk has the corner on the tin market. They're going to attack the Elamites and thus open up trade the other way. They would eventually come to battle, but not for another generation or two. There is a myth where Gilgamesh fights the king of Kish, who might have been a prince of Kish at the time. It's kind of unclear. But Gilgamesh fights this guy, and they have this epic battle. The city is under siege. Gilgamesh manages to take control and capture the king of this attacking army. And then he does something interesting. Instead of imprisoning him or executing him or the things that you would expect a king to do to a attacking enemy, no, he says, when I was a young boy, I lived in Kish, and your family took me in. Your family was nice to me when I was on the run. And because of this long ago friendship, I am going to release you, and you and I are going to be friends. That's interesting. You really don't see that sort of ending in a lot of military stories. And afterwards, sure, there was still a rivalry between Uruk and Kish, but you no longer had the warfare. About a generation earlier, the king of Uruk went into Kish and essentially assassinated the king of Kish. It says, Dumuzi the shepherd took the king of Kish single-handedly. Now, there's a little bit more to it. A war is never just about one thing. So there's one thing that most of these cities, Aratta, Kish, and Uruk, had in common. And they were all patrons of Inanna, but all in different ways. Aratta worshipped Inanna, and they were on the far end of the religious trade route. And I say religious trade route. There is this procession of the idol of Inanna, and it starts in Uruk, and it travels across the rivers. It goes to Kish, and at the very, very far end, it goes to Aratta. Well, at some point, the king Enmerkar says the idol of Inanna is no longer going to get to Aratta. The religious procession is never going to get there. So this is a grave offense in the ancient world. This is saying, we are going to withhold your city's God from your city. It's similar to the Crusaders taking Mecca. It's similar to the control of Jerusalem. It's similar to whatever the religious center is. You have now cut the people off from it. And a lot of wars throughout Mesopotamia were fought over the rights of the people to worship the gods that they cherish. And so there was some back and forth between Uruk and Aratta just because of that. Now, you can't underestimate the material value of tin, but you can also not underestimate the people's love for their gods. Anyway, so you've got this battle that controls tin and also controls the access to essentially the most popular god in the ancient Near East. And because of this, you've got Aratta and Uruk locked in conflict for about 3 generations. Now, I know that there was a lot there. We've explored lost cities. We've explored ancient geopolitical alliances. We've explored metallurgy. Oh, one other thing I was going to mention. So I mentioned that the burnt city was founded around 2,500 years ago. Well, not 2,500 years ago, 2,500 BC. Big difference. This is coincidental because that's around the time when a lot of the earliest of the Indus Valley language families, the Dravidians, that's when they're thought to have originated. It's also around the time when the quality of tin started to improve in Mesopotamia. It's additionally also about the same time that the Urartu people started to have their decline. So what we can see long into the future, long after the time of Gilgamesh, we see this shifting in trade route. Now tin no longer is controlled by the local distributors, those minor mines that dug up low quality tin ore. Now it's coming from across the world, but it's so much better quality. Well, that's gonna completely shift the need of the people of Mesopotamia for the products of the Urartu. And so that led to a decline. There was an invasion from the north of Indo-Europeans down into this area, and you get the rise of the Hurrians after that. So, lot to take in. What questions do you guys have?